President-elect Donald Trump structured his campaign around many controversial ideas. One of the most notable being that he would build an impermeable wall on the border between the United States of America and the United Mexican States to prevent illegal immigration. Though he has retracted his ambition to build the entire wall out of concrete, 30 feet high and 10 feet wide, he still maintains that there will be a continuous physical barrier along the border. The proposal is one of the hottest topics of discussion surrounding the new president-elect, but few people are talking about what a continuous physical barrier would do to wildlife populations occupying the border area. Wildlife species very rarely have an impermeable barrier that blocks their ability to move simply pop up out of nowhere. More often than not, the biggest barriers they encounter without human intervention are things like mountains or canyons. And canyons can take millions of years to pose a threat to the dispersal of wildlife populations, giving them a chance to migrate and adapt to the barrier. The implementation of Donald Trump's wall would mean no time for the animals to migrate or adapt ways to cross it. Populations of certain species on either side of the border that had previously interacted would suddenly be cut off permanently from one another. And populations rely on each other for sources of genetic diversity and also to recolonize areas where population numbers have dropped. Let's say we have a population of sheep over here and a population over there. Individuals can freely migrate between populations, breed, and swap their genes. This provides both populations with an external source of genetic diversity so that if disease strikes, there is a better chance that at least some of the individuals will be genetically resistant and the populations will survive. If we cut off gene flow between these two populations, both of their respective genetic diversities decrease and they are both more susceptible to disease. Now let's think about what would happen if one of these populations was experiencing a bad year for resources, namely food. Individuals from that population are going to starve and die off, and the only way the population will persist in that area is if a healthy population is able to recolonize it by providing an influx of individuals via emigration. So if we build a wall in between the two populations and one of them has a bad year for resources, that population will simply become locally extinct. A study done in 2009 highlights how an impermeable barrier along the US-Mexico border would affect two species, the pygmy owl and the desert bighorn sheep. Let's look at the adorable pygmy owl. One of the main findings of the study was that only about 23% of the recorded pygmy owl flights exceeded a height of 4 meters. On top of this, their maximum flight height was also directly correlated with the height of the vegetation in an area. So where there was higher vegetation, the owls flew higher. Where there was lower vegetation, the owl's flight height dropped. This is important because we see that currently along the border, fenced areas are disturbed or cleared of vegetation. The pygmy owls are low flying to begin with, but without any vegetation, their flights become significantly lower. Trump's wall would then be an absolute nightmare for these poor little guys trying to disperse across the border and could greatly hinder populations on either side of the border from reaching each other, if not cutting them off completely. The case would probably be even worse for the desert bighorn sheep. Populations of these animals are highly sensitive to stochastic events and oftentimes exhibit local extinction. Therefore, the bighorns are very dependent on recolonization. Past implementations of roads in the US have already cut off populations from each other, greatly reducing genetic diversity and eliminating any chance of recolonization. This study shows a web of connections between populations on either side of the border. There is no question that these populations of desert bighorns will suffer significantly if Donald Trump goes through with his plan. And these are just a couple of species that would be cut off from cross-border dispersal. Other articles suggest that ocelots, jaguars, javelinas, Sonoran pronghorns, and others would also suffer the consequences. This could then impact the ecosystems which they all play important roles in and negatively affect species that don't even need to cross the border. Some people might say that there is too much speculation and we really can't say for sure exactly what would happen. And these people are correct. And that is one of the scariest parts of the proposal to build a wall on the border. At the end of the day, we really don't know what will happen to wildlife around the border. We can see in other cases where an impermeable barrier was put in and there were unforeseen consequences. For example, in the 1800s, farmers in southern Australia were losing their sheep to predatory wild dogs known as dingoes. So a fence was built to keep the dingoes out, and it was certainly successful in doing so. However, dingoes are a predator of kangaroos. So in the absence of one of their most important predators in southern Australia, the kangaroo populations flourished. only to the dismay of the farmers as kangaroos compete for the same food source as their beloved sheep. Maybe we should try to preserve these ecosystems and learn more about them before we go and start building walls. Surely we can think of something better than a wall to address the illegal immigration problem. It'd be nice to think that we've made some progress since China tried the same tactic over 2,000 years ago.
I'll have to ask my accountant about that.